So welcome to Writing with Purpose. I am Angela Cook, and I am going to be your instructor during the next 4 weeks. So just a little bit of background on myself. I was a high school history teacher for several years. I actually have a degree, a bachelor's degree in history, with a secondary study in women's studies. So I have a liberal arts degree, history degree, and then before I did that, I was a vocal performance major, but I'm not as competitive as some of those people. So I had to quit that because it was not healthy for me to be in that kind of environment with that much competition for something I just love doing. So that's what made me do history, because I knew I wanted to be a school teacher, and I'm really bad at math. So I couldn't be an elementary school teacher because I didn't want to take the math classes. Like, seriously, that was my logic. Well, I'm really bad at math, so yeah. So I got my history degree because I've always loved history. It was my favorite in high school. I had the best high school history teacher. And so that's a little bit of my background. Being a history major requires an enormous amount of writing. Every single class, you write 10 to 12 to 24 page papers. That is not abnormal. So you automatically become a better writer just because you're forced to do it all the time. And even if you're not a good writer, you start to see your own flaws because you have someone pointing all of them out when they grade your papers. And so you just kind of learn by default. So then the last 11 years, I've been homeschooling my own children. I retired from public school teaching and started homeschooling my kids because I want to raise weird people. Sorry, that was a joke. Yeah, that was a personal inside joke. Yeah, and maybe a slam on a few people I know. But yeah, so I've been doing that for 11 years, and my kids are totally weird. And so, yeah, they're a little odd, but I love them. And so been homeschooling, and in the homeschooling process, I also started really learning a lot more about writing, having to teach my own children how to write and what it would take to help them write well without the fear of writing. And so learned a lot just from doing those things. And so that brought me here to East Coast Christian University. I'm really thankful to be able to do it because I love teaching, and it's an opportunity outside of just homeschooling that really helps. So we can, if you want to look at this, your syllabus, just really quick, you can call me, email me, text me. I like texting. If you have questions, I have no issue. You can text me anytime. My phone is set so that when I go to bed at night, only a few people are able to get through to me. So I answer questions later. No big deal. So texting is really the easiest way to get in touch with me because it's available. But if you have something you just want, just email me. No big deal if you don't need to answer soon. I do have MySpace. I do, yes. Have some MySpace. So, course purpose. Student will be exposed to new perspectives and appreciation for the writing process. Okay. So that's honestly one of my number one. Like, we don't even need to go any further. Did I spell something wrong?
No, I'm just underlining appreciation.
Oh, good, okay. I'm like, oh no, is there a typo in the syllabus seriously right now?
I wouldn't find it, don't worry.
Student will use various technological, we'll talk about technology, and I think that might help some people. Yeah, when I learned of even some of these things, I'm like, oh my gosh, just being out of the, real world classroom and just in homeschooling, I'm like, whoa, there is so much more technology just within a few years. Mm-hmm. It's crazy. Mm-hmm. We'll touch on reviewing some grammar. We do not have the amount of time that it would take for us to really dig into grammar. So be thankful because it's a lot of work and I don't like it either. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But I will show you some things that you can use, tools, online programs that you can get on where if you really want to dive deeper into grammar, which I know Nick really wants to, you can do a lot of that online nowadays. And one day maybe we'll have a grammar school where you can, I don't know who would do it, but develop something on our own website that you guys could go to. But for now, there's so many colleges. Even Eastern Florida State has a great tutoring program online that's free. It's not with a person. It's just links that you can get on and find out if you're writing properly. But we'll go over technology. Grammar, we'll use technology, and then we'll touch on it a little bit, some of the most common issues with grammar that we see nowadays that will affect your daily life versus, you know, the big paper stuff, because most of what we'll be writing is day to day. Most of us are not probably going to go on and write a book. Now, some of us might, but the majority of us will not be going on to do that. But we will make posts on Facebook and in our MySpace, and we want to sound intelligent, right? Okay, so I'm just teasing. Writing strategy number 4, processes to analyze and write about issues important to specific audiences and purposes, and you will gain a strong awareness of your own development as a writer. And I'm 100% confident in that. I can say 100% across the board from day 1 to the last day when you hand in a final paper, which is not very long, from day 1 to day 4, week 4, I guess I should say, you will change. Like your perspective will change, or your writing style and the way you are able to communicate will change. Like, I can totally promise. I've seen that happen to everybody. I use a book that I actually didn't even bring with me to show you, but it's the New Oxford Guide to Writing. You are not required to have it. If you think you would desire to go on to get a little deeper with writing for yourself personally, if you do have a heart to want to write a book or author something, definitely have something like that on your shelf at home, but we won't be using that as a primary source. It'll just more be a resource for me to give you information. So you don't have to purchase that. It's totally optional. If you like having books on your shelf like I do, you'll buy it.
I ordered it today.
Yeah, it's a great thing to have. It's a great thing to look back at, or just, I can't possibly cover everything that's in it, so I just took little tidbits, and you can have it as a resource. All right, and then attend all classes or listen to any missed classes, participate and engage in class discussions and peer activities. We'll be doing a lot of that in here versus outside because of the writing process. Weekly assignments and or quizzes. Every week there'll be a short 10 question quiz. You can easily do that. They're not difficult. That just helps give you kind of like a base for a grade versus just the paper. That helps you, FYI. And then complete a 2-page essay implementing practices learned during class. 2-page, you can do it, Shelley.
Yeah, you can, Shelley.
And 2 pages, I picked 2 pages because that gives you a good solid 5-paragraph essay style essay.
Double spaced.
Yeah,
Double
that's what I was
space,
thinking.
half inch.
Is there a minimum
Half-inch margins.
font size?
12.
14.
12.
It's MLA format.
It is MLA, and we will be talking about that. But I'll tell you
This
right
is
up
the
front,
final?
that'll be like your final draft would be that 12 font, double space, and half-inch margins. And I will be measuring.
The variety of people in the room just makes it empty. It's me and Nate.
Lovely. With a bunch of ladies old enough to be your mother, so
Yeah.
watch it.
We're gonna keep
You
guys
could get
awake.
backhanded real quick. So, anyway, that's the little bit of what we'll be going over. And so that's that. Let's see. We'll have just like everybody's taking classes, so that here, so you get the online chat discussion and all that. I'll post probably a question just to have some dialogue. After we've had conversation here, it makes it easier to do that. We can continue that. And part of the reason for doing that also is to help people who are taking this online, or like Erin Brooker should be here. She'll be here next week, but she can get involved in some conversation online, just like usual. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do really quick is start out by actually using a reading and writing method that you can use when you're writing something, especially in school. If you're asked to do a paper in Galatians, we need you to write a 2-page paper, and I know some of you have already done this, that's why I'm using this example. 2-page paper on Galatians. And like the first reaction, and what do you mean? What are you talking about? A 2-page paper on Galatians. So we're going to use a format that I think works really well. So I'm told to do a paper on Galatians. So the very first thing I always do when I'm asked to write a paper is to ask myself 3 questions. What do I want to know? What have I learned? Hold on, let me make sure. What do you already know? What do I already know? What do I want to learn? And then what have I learned? So it's called a KWL. They use it all through school. You use it in college. It's a teaching method. Yes.
The first one was number 1?
It is, What do you already know?
Knowledge.
Yes, knowledge. What do you want to learn? W. Want. And what have you learned? L. KWL. So, you have me worried over here. Am I going to have to commandeer your computer?
I don't have a pen.
What the heck is wrong with you?
You don't have a pen? Why do you say so? I have like a pen.
I
Do you
don't.
have
That was
another?
just up here.
Oh.
It's so hot in here. So
Is
anyway,
that KWL in, it's not in here, right? It's,
I don't think it might be. I don't know because I haven't seen those. It's in my notes, so no, and it's not something you have to be
Okay.
too. Just
Did we
we'll
have
go.
a quiz?
No, I don't think so. I don't know. I haven't seen the quiz yet either, or I haven't looked at the quiz again. I haven't reviewed the quiz. I'm sorry. It might be. So just anything I say could very well be on the quiz. Nick is cheating. I'm teasing. It does look like you're cheating. So what do you already know? What do you want to learn? And what have you learned? So those first two things, as you can tell, are things you can come out right up front. You don't have to wait to go through a class. You don't have to wait to read the book to know the answers to those two things. What do you already know? Okay, so in Galatians, you'd say, what do I already know? So we're going to use it according to grammar in English. So we're going to ask those questions. What do you already know about writing in English grammar? The process. So just throw some things out there. What do you already know? It can be anything.
Sentence structure.
Sentence structure.
yeah, thesis.
Thesis. So basically you chart, I'm not going to try to write on here.
Conclusion.
Conclusion, okay? Yeah, stuff that simple, huh?
Intro.
Intro, your intro. Anything else? What do you already know? The body of the paragraph.
Punctuation.
Punctuation.
Yeah, format.
Format.
Yeah.
Anything else good?
Yeah.
What about just English in general? Not even about writing. Spanish is a language. Okay. Oh, ow. That was my funny
Type
bone.
out the numbers, like don't put 3, type THRE.
Okay, okay.
You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
that's,
yep.
Yeah, that's
Big
important.
So we'll get points and demerits. I'm just kidding. Yeah, so that's kind of the process you go through. So if you were doing that for a book study you needed to do, well, what do I already know about Galatians? Well, Paul wrote Galatians. Well, this, whatever you might already know in your head. There maybe is a verse, oh, Galatians is where they talk about the fruit of the Spirit. You just write those things down, whatever the topic is. Okay, so what do you want to learn about English grammar? I mean, we've already kind of talked about that, but just throw it out. What? You have to learn something, so don't say I don't want to learn anything.
Where to put periods?
Where to put punctuation?
Just periods.
Just periods, okay. So you're good with commas and all that. It's just the periods.
It's the
Okay.
opposite. I can throw a period anywhere I want.
I think just in general, like how to write a better paper.
How to write a better paper.
How to properly quote verses in the Bible.
Oh, good. I like it.
Inline citations.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
What's with the
That's a big one.
semicolon?
What's with the semicolon? Good question. I hate it. I would ban it from writing, but we'll go
It's
there.
before
We'll
a
go there
list,
too.
right?
We will go there, huh?
Isn't it before a list? Like before you list something?
That's a colon.
What's a colon?
2 dots.
Isn't it my body?
He wants to learn about the colon.
It's a dot and a comma.
I thought this was
Semicolon.
column 1, not anatomy.
Nope. Both. So that what we would want to learn. Those are so that you're throwing that out there. If
That's
you
a really cool acronym. I like that. That's cool.
Yes, it's great to get you thinking and brainstorming.
Yeah.
And honestly, it's such I know I hate to say this, but it's such an elementary method, but it works.
Yeah.
It works. And I don't know why they don't have us doing it in college more. Like you get in these classes, I watch my brother go through his class and I'm like, why wouldn't they tell him that? It would be so I told him that. Like I was his tutor. He ended up getting a B in the class, which was really hard. It was an English Comp 101 taught by a Russian guy. Yeah, that would be tough.
Wow.
So it was really hard for him to understand his accent and everything. Anyway, okay, so then what have you learned? So obviously we can't decide what we have learned because, well, we've learned now that the colon is also punctuation and not just, ooh, my screen just started getting all funky, is not just part of your body. It's actually a part of punctuation. So we've learned that. We could put that in the learned column. So we want to see the things in our know or in our what do we want to learn column move to our learned column. Once you're able to do a little bit of that, so writing about Galatians, in order to get there, what do you need to do?
Read it.
Read Galatians.
Right.
Right. So there has to be some action. Some classes you want to learn things that can only be taught by the professor or the person who knows more about it than you do. So you have, what do I have to do? I have to go to the classes. So you looking at this is again just one method of getting some thoughts down on paper in order to learn something so you can write something well. If you don't know anything about what you're writing about, you're not going to write a good paper. End of like that's the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
So there's your first step to writing a good paper. Just know about what you want to write about. Even that, you don't even have to know a lot. Okay, so that is that. I got to see if I'm going to make sure
I
I go.
love that. That's really cool. I've never heard that before, so.
I'm not quite sure how to move to the next. Oh, next. Oh, next. Foundations of writing. All right. So the goal of this first night of class, Writing with Purpose, is to change the way you think about writing and the writing process. I told Shelley that earlier. My goal is to change the way you think because either there's words, and I thought I had let me just push through here really quick. I thought I had a couple slides that I thought I asked the question. Maybe I did it earlier or later. Asking the question, when you think of writing or English comp, what is the very first word that comes to your brain? Or the first thought that comes to your mind about
Papers.
Huh?
Writing papers.
Papers?
Yeah.
Too much.
Too much?
I didn't want to
Scary.
Scary?
Yeah, overwhelming.
Overwhelming? Nick,
Yeah.
what's the first thing
Yeah.
that comes to your mind when you think I have to
Yeah.
take this writing class?
I hate writing.
Okay, I hate writing. I've heard that one too. That was actually Shanna's statement the year she took
I
it.
didn't want to take it, honestly. I mean, because it's such a struggle for me sometimes to really, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be writing paper after paper after paper after paper after paper. And it's just going to be overwhelming. And then just with everything else going on, I thought, I'm overwhelmed enough.
Yeah, overwhelming.
I don't know that I can really add any more in right now,
Yeah.
But then Casey was like, no.
And she took my class, so she can actually attest to like knowing.
Yeah.
That's the only reason I feel confident about continuing to do this because it is so out of the ordinary. But my goal is to change the way you think. My goal is to change that. I hate writing. And you may still leave the class and still not enjoy the writing process, but my heart and what I desire to help people do is at least just not hate it, to recognize something about it. And so that's my goal. So we have speaking and writing. You will be taking, have you all taken the Communicate for a Change class? Did anyone take that yet? Okay. I don't know if that's on the pastoral track and everyone will take that or if it's on the theology track. I took it, but I think I took that for a different reason. So I'll have to look into it. But speaking and communicating, whether you're in here and you think you may write or speak, if you even enjoy speaking in front of people, or maybe you don't have to do it all the time, but you'd like to get better at it. A better writer is going to also be a better speaker. If you're able to write well, you will be able to also speak well because once you can articulate yourself on paper, it'll be much easier to articulate yourself verbally. And so they go hand in hand. Speaking and writing go hand in hand. So we're going to talk about two broad assumptions when it comes to writing. The first is writing is, and these are in your notes, so if you want to add stuff, you can. Writing is a reasonable activity. So what I mean by reasonable activity, most people believe that writing is a reasonable activity. Can everybody agree? Mm-hmm. Yes, this is a reasonable. What are some reasons why we would consider a reasonable activity? What makes it?
Like as a journal.
Journaling?
Yeah.
Emails.
Emailing? Okay.
There's less writing, I think, nowadays. Everything's so digital.
True. But the bottom line is writing. Like even if you're just texting, it's a reasonable activity. So we come to that conclusion to say writing is necessary. Mm-hmm. Whether you are only texting, like I said, most of us we're not thinking, oh, I'm going to write a book one day. I can honestly say when I was 16, 17, 18, and I was taking Com 1 in college, when I got into that place, I could have cared less about writing. I took AP English because my friends were all taking it, and I could
Yeah.
maybe get a college credit if I could pass the test. So I didn't.
Mhm.
And so, like, writing, I didn't care then. Now I'm like, oh, I love it. But it's reasonable because if all I did was write posts on social media, I should try to sound somewhat intelligent. So it's reasonable.
Yeah.
And then the second one is writing is a valuable activity. And again, this goes hand in hand with it being reasonable. It's valuable. If you cannot communicate well, you are going to struggle. And anyone who cannot read, like if you were to ask anyone, I remember this old man, he used to sit outside this old school building where we had in services and stuff, and he would say, oh, I wish so bad I would have learned how to read. He said, I wish young people knew how hard my life was because of that. I can't even fill out my own job application. Thank you. My own job application. And it hit me. I'm like, because I've never been illiterate. So I can't even fathom how that would feel. And just some of the things he was saying, I'm like, wow, like that's big. Like that's a really big deal. And so it's valuable. Like there's nothing not valuable about writing. And I can say, and you all can attest, you get certain job applications even, you have to write a paragraph to describe and explain why you want to have the job. It's a valuable activity. And so it's definitely valuable. Not all people believe that, and that's okay. But I do think the reason we don't think it's valuable is because we might fall into your category. We're afraid of it. It's really, I'm not even going to consider that valuable because I'm afraid of it, or I don't think I will ever need it. You're young. You might not think I will ever need this, and that's totally normal. But it is valuable. Writing helps clarify one's thinking. It improves all other means of communication by enhancing vocabulary and promoting the ability to formulate thoughts in coherent and creative ways. It is a first cousin to public speaking because it helps frame the material in a fashion that makes it explicable and communicable. That is essential in public speaking. So I think about apparently Mark just talked about his personal life today in the apprenticeship because of your question, and cried like a big baby. That's what he told me. So I couldn't keep it together. He's like, dang that Nick asking me personal questions. But my husband today went into the apprenticeship luncheon because he preached a message a few weeks ago during mezzanine, and all the young people were just like, what the heck? Not all of them. I mean, the ones who think it's valuable. But a lot of them were like, wow, what the heck? Like, when did you learn how to do that? How did you learn how to do that? How did you get all those scripture in there? Yada, yada, yada. Like asking him a lot of questions. How do you write a sermon? How did you write a message? So we went in today to maybe talk a little bit about that. But what it boils right down to is he wrote it down and he reads and then he formulates. It says to formulate thoughts in coherent and creative ways. To formulate thoughts. Well, once you start writing, even if you write it down 17 times, you're formulating those thoughts that eventually can come out of your face. And if they never come off the paper and all you want to do is be a public speaker, you still need to learn how to write semi well. Now, you might not have to write perfect paragraphs where all the grammar is correct, but you might want to write bullet points with coherent ideas underneath of them. You don't want to write, I'm going to discuss the color of the sky or why the sky is blue, and then everything under it has to do with the ground and trees and grass and only explaining what they do. You want to be able to formulate coherent thoughts. So, articles online about this subject. The chat forum will be based on 3 articles, which you will read and discuss together. And you don't need to worry about that right now. They'll be up. And I don't even know if it's this week. It could be next week. But we'll talk about those by chat forum. It won't be in class. So if you don't see them get posted tomorrow, it's next week that we do that. All right, writing is a way of growing. Our growth as learners depends on our capacity to understand and use language. Education and a good writer. I'm just going to click so everything's up here. Okay. Oh, let me see. Oh man. Hold on. Oh no. Oh yeah. This is all new. Okay, so this is just kind of a quick overview. This is about education and being a good writer. Now, most of us, again, a lot of our fear of writing and this education process really goes back to how we were educated and how things have evolved over the years in education. And so education has an impact on how well you write. There are always exceptions to this rule. There are people who, for whatever reason, they're just like someone who can play the piano or do something amazing. There are people who just have the skill and ability to communicate in writing and verbally, just we don't know why. Like they're just something in them just works that way. So there are always exceptions to that rule. Do you believe you received, so this is the question, do you believe you received what you needed to be a successful writer in your lifetime? Up until this point in life, do you feel like you've received what you need to be a good writer?
No.
No.
Most
No.
people say no.
Yes.
So, yes? Aw. I was hoping maybe you did, because there are some really great English teachers out there and like people who teach you how to write well. I did not learn how to write well till I got to college, and I was forced to do it though. And even then, no one taught me how to do it. It was like trial and error, trial and error. And then when it dawned, when I started teaching my own kids, that's when I'm like, is this what my 10th grade English teacher was trying to teach me? Because I did have one English teacher in high school, and I know she was really good at it, but I was just not in the place to be learning that kind of stuff. Like, that was just not the year for me. But
You know
she
what,
probably
I
would
think
have.
30 years ago, I probably would have answered yes to that question. I mean, I feel like, all those years ago that, yeah, I think I was pretty well equipped. But now all these years later, definitely not.
Right.
A lot's changed.
Yeah. Well, and you went into a profession that doesn't require that type of writing.
Not that kind, you're right.
Right.
Yeah,
Like certain
exactly.
types of writing where you have to communicate clearly,
Right.
but in a different way, more technical.
If I had continued to use it, I would not lose it.
Yeah, and that really is the case. That's what happened in being a history major. You write all the time. If you any type of arts degree, you're going to write all the time. But you get something like if you get an your anything in the medical world, you're more technical writing, and that's pretty cut and dry.
Charting.
Yeah. Yeah, and then just write, if you have to write little details, but it doesn't mean you have to, you just have to give the good details. You don't need to be articulate in the sense of standing up and orating about this person's chart. So that makes sense, yeah. So, but the majority of us would say we don't feel like we learned what we needed to be a good writer. Most people don't go on to do anything in writing, so it's kind of clear that it's not a very important, like keep it going kind of thing. But yet in college, you're expected to do it well. So now we're going to look at a couple ways of educating. We have student-centered education. And so we're going to look at this. Student-centered education is how most of us are educated. So I want you to just look at this diagram, and I want you to tell me what you see. Like, what is the prevailing things in this diagram? What are you seeing here? The student is where? Right, so student-centered. And what's happening?
I think everything requires you to write something.
So just thinking about the way we're educated and looking at this diagram, what are you seeing happening to the student?
Like being bombarded by everything all at once.
Okay.
Overwhelmed.
Yeah, here's some science, here's some literature,
And it's all focusing on the student.
Yeah.
Okay, so now let's look at this one. So this would be God-centered, a God-centered model instead of, now, people who maybe who home educate, but don't believe in God, and there are quite a few people out there like that, they might say home-centered education and have home in the middle, but we're talking about God-centered education because this is where we're trying to shift the way we think about writing. So God-centered, so what do you see going on here? Obviously, God's in the center.
Yeah.
It's a two-way street there, going back and forth.
Okay.
Rather than just all the arrows pointing one way.
Okay. And what do we notice about the subject areas?
They all connect.
They're revolving around God.
Yes.
Created it all.
Yeah. I'm going to go back to that one because I want to see.
Forward and backward and
So looking at this one, I'm kind of giving some notes too from other classes that other students have shared also. Seeing subjects as separate from each other gives options to disregard one as not being necessary for your life.
Yeah.
So I disregarded Math.
Me too.
Shelley disregarded English grammar, which would include writing, because it terrified her. Okay? Like, you can see how you can disregard them from each other. Now, the education system's done a pretty decent job over the years in trying to make this evolve into, I can't think of the word they use. It's right on the tip of my tongue. Where cross-curricular, cross-subject. So, like, they want you to learn a little bit of history in math, and they want you to learn a little math in reading, and
A little
like,
cohesive kind of.
so they've tried to do that, because even the education system started to recognize, wait a minute, we're putting these too much in boxes, and then we're losing something. So student-centered education lends itself to the student being entertained also, because everything is focused on the student, creating the students to be more entertained. The word for that is the word entertain comes from the Greek word amuse, which means to not think, to stare stupidly.
Well, like at the TV.
Yeah, but just that idea is, well, think about, TV is very self-centered.
Yeah.
It's all about you being entertained. You're giving nothing to the process. Now, in education, what you might have been given was just to regurgitate a bunch of stuff, which is what we've seen kind of swing back in education, where kids are being taught to a test. You're going to take a test, hurry up and study. Take the test, hurry up and study, take the test. Okay, we don't need to worry about what you studied last month, now take the test. And even in college, I have found I liked history because it wasn't a bunch of multiple choice fill in the blank questions. It was writing. So you really couldn't get anything wrong, because you were discussing your perspective or your point of view or someone else's information. You used a resource to formulate thinking. That's higher level thinking than scribbling in a bunch of circles. It might show that you know the content, but then guess what? 6 months down the road, you forgot all about that. But if you had to write about it, you would most likely remember more about it. I can remember things I wrote about way easier than any fill in the blank test that I took. So then bad thinking, seeing writing as a subject rather than a tool that God has given us in order to communicate his truth. And so that's another shift we want to make in our thinking, that God has given us the writing process in order for us to communicate his truth. And frankly, sometimes to communicate to him. Some of my most deep shared heart has been in writing in a journal, just because I couldn't say the words, but I could write them down. And I burned those journals. I'm just And then, okay, so then God-centered, we kind of talked a little bit about that. All the subjects revolve around God, but he also interacts with each subject.
Right.
So he's in, just like you said, it looks like it's more give and take.
Yeah.
There's also, and I'd say there's give and give. He is part of all of the subjects, which are all part of one another, which then in turn give us something. At this point, all of the subjects are also related and interacting. And so that's why we want to focus on, I'm showing you this just as an idea that we're not just doing this so you can figure out how to write a paper a little better. It's really to help you understand how important the process is to every single subject, every single thing that goes on in our world. And again, not to say you have to turn around and write papers all the time either, but just to change your thinking, and then maybe so you won't be afraid of it, and maybe you'll start writing a journal after this, and that would be amazing, You're like, no, it wouldn't.
No, it would be. No, seriously.
Oh, good, yay.
I can't tell you how many I've started just in the last year.
Oh, I love it.
Like maybe if I buy this pretty journal, that'll motivate me.
Mm-hmm.
And I do it for like 3 days, and then I go buy a different pretty journal. Like,
I do that too, but that's just because I like pretty journals. If you ever need to buy me a gift, I love pretty journals. Bell's Outlet, they have them for $2.99. I got the cutest journal for $2.99. Oh, sorry, off the subject. Okay, sorry, Nick. I know you want to go buy me a pretty journal. Okay, the way we learn, stages of learning. Okay, so we're gonna get through this sort of quickly. What am I at right now, time-wise? Almost 8. We're good. We're gonna muscle through. Okay. So we have 3 stages of learning. And again, this will be more fascinating once we get all the way through it. It seems a little right now, but it'll be okay. Primary is the foundation or the grammar stage. So a lot of times we think grammar, that has to do with English. Mm-hmm. Sure. But it's actually the foundational stage of the way we learn. Grammar is actually words. Grammar is Like if we pick up your Bible and you start the words God, Lord, love, trust, grace, those are the grammar of the Bible. So when you're a young kid, you start learning those simple words like God is love, Jesus loves me. That's building a foundational grammatical, that's the simplest way I can think to describe it. I have to just click through. What the heck? All of these at one time. Darn it. And so that's your foundation, that every single language or every single subject, like we just looked at, has a grammar, a foundation of grammar, all sorts of words. We threw out a bunch of words that have to do with English grammar. Punctuation, periods, semicolons, all that. That's the grammar of English. So you could go through any subject and think of the grammar of that subject. History, Hitler, like kids can throw out these names. Why I picked Hitler, I don't know. Mm-hmm. Is he in the news a lot right now? Hitler. I'm trying to think of words now. Come on, help me out. Yeah. Stalin.
Revolution.
Revolution.
Yeah.
I don't know why that was the
Civil
first
War.
thing that
Yeah.
I am German. Maybe that's why. But there's but then when you're learning this grammar, then you get a little older, you move to the secondary dialectic logic stage. All of a sudden now you're hearing full information about these things. You're like, oh, I recognize that. Oh, I recognize that. So it's, again, a building block of how you learn. Then once you've you have all these building blocks where you've learned some of the words, you've learned what some of it means, then the last stage of learning is rhetoric. And that is when you can articulate, you can debate, you can do things. Where are my notes? I have to be able to talk about these in notes. I'm so sorry. Clearly I didn't write them down. They're supposed to be in my thing right here. This is driving me bonkers too because I keep hitting it with my elbow. So that's the rhetoric stage. And that's the last one where, again, college is really the ultimate rhetoric stage. Let me just see what my next slides are. All right, well, grammar stage. We'll get a little deeper into each one. This generally takes place from preschool to elementary years. And what you do during the grammar stage is naming things. So if you've ever tried to learn a second language, this is a perfect example, Spanish, for instance. You put the words all over everything in the house. That's one method of being immersed into it if you can't actually go to a country where they speak, or a home where they speak Spanish primarily. So you would put names, everything. Attending, you'd go to things where you hear. Again, that's kind of a building block for when you're trying to learn a second language. Memorizing. A lot of people will say, well, that's stupid. I don't need to memorize. Like, that's just old school rote memorization. That's worthless. It is not. It is one of the, it's just like when they say a baby, you really want a baby to crawl for a few months before it starts walking. There could be some developmental delays if it's the other way around. And so they watch those. Same thing with memorizing. There's nothing wrong with memorizing and getting a baseline for things, and to be able to regurgitate them later. We'll talk about that in just a second because this does tie in. Expressing, just talking, storytelling. With a kid, you would ask them to tell the story over. You would talk about something. Now you'd say, now repeat what I just said to you. What did you hear? Like, what, I don't know what I would say, but you get the child to regurgitate the story to you. Tell the story now. So that's in the grammar stage. And all of this is based on just what words that they've learned. It's not, they won't have any intelligence about it, but they might be able to retell the story. Learning vocabulary and the words of the language, said that. Memorization is valuable. I should probably click through these instead of talking through them at once. Okay, then the dialectic logic stage. This is the part where you get to define, you get to compare circumstances. So, for instance, it's going to be very hard for someone who has a very basic knowledge of any subject to be able to compare something with something else. Because if they don't know what this thing is, it's going to be very difficult for them to compare. So this is that stage of learning where you actually you start to have kind of like your own thinking, possibly. This should start shifting. This is where that shift comes, to be able to think for yourself. Now, you can't fully yet. You're still taking information you've heard from other people, but you might actually start to be able to compare. Let me click through. because it might have some of the stuff generally develops and overlaps grammar stage. So this is between 5th and 9th. If you think about the way young people grow too, like if you've had teenagers, you get to that place where you're like, wait a minute, I don't want you to think for yourself yet. Like, I still want to be able to tell you don't have to go and you're not going to ask me why. This is that stage where they're like, well, why can't I go? Well, I don't understand. And almost to the point where then they're like, well, wait, I think I can make my own decisions. I don't have to put that food in my mouth. Like, I won't die. You're not going to make me, like, that reasoning ability. This is that stage you start seeing a little bit of reasoning, and I have 3 teenage boys right now. So I'm like, dang it. They don't know. Now I don't know. To them, they're like, why? You don't know anything.
Yeah.
I'm to that stage where nobody thinks I know anything. So you are able to relate, give testimony to things, and argue. That's what we're getting at. Using vocabulary during this stage to articulate thoughts and to dissect arguments of others, able to determine bad reasoning. So when you used to be able to get away with, because I told you so, because I said so. No, that does not work for me, mother. I need the real reason. And they're not being mean and they're not being bad. They just really want to understand because they're like, that's not good reasoning. That makes no sense. So this is that stage. And continue to build new vocabulary. Every single stage of learning, you always continue to build vocabulary. We should never stop doing that in our lives. Rhetoric stage. Growth takes place overlapping the secondary stage, though the post-secondary years, through the post-secondary years, high school and beyond. So the rhetoric years, this is when you're able to invent. This would be when you should be able to come up with your own topic to write on. Arrange information in order to deliver it to others. Elocution, to be able to actually make it happen. Memory, deliver, persuade. Persuade is a big one to me because a lot of times our conversations, our goal is to try to persuade someone to think the way we think. This entire class is to try to persuade you to think differently about writing. And so if I don't do that well, you're not going to feel any different. You might hate it more when you leave here. Please don't. You might hate it more when you leave here. We hope you won't. But this is that stage where you are able to articulate well enough to help persuade people to think a certain way. To think, we're in a season 2 right now. It's kind of not neither here nor there. We're in a season right now where everybody's expressing their opinions about everything. You want to be able to do that well if you really do feel passionate about something, because otherwise and we've all seen it happen. It turns to name calling and being ugly just because when you start to get angry and misunderstood, that's your first defense is to be like, oh, well, you're just an idiot. I just feel really insecure and stupid right now, but you're just an idiot, and you walk away. Like, none of us want to be those people. Getting to this stage of learning and then knowing how to do something with it is very valuable. I don't know, maybe I just like to talk. I like to tell people about things I think. So other people might not. My friends, like, I could care less what people think, and I don't want to tell them what I think. So that's okay.
But I mean, also in like presenting the gospel, like that's what I was just watching a video on. It's the humor of like whenever you share Jesus, but I'm not trying to like convince you. Like, no, yeah, you are.
Yeah,
like,
you
that's
are.
Our goal
Yeah.
is to get people to love Jesus.
Our heart should be to reconcile people to Jesus. And so that's, again, you touched on something that we haven't quite gotten to. I'm actually sharing all of this to come to that conclusion. No, it's totally fine. So let me click through these.
And you never want to sound like not intelligent, like especially if you're going to go to that level.
Right. When you get to that stage.
Yeah.
Yes.
You really ought to know your delivery, appropriate delivery, mature delivery.
And if you don't, you don't have to say anything. It's okay. But if we are at a place, if we're even in these classes, and this is what I tell people, if you're coming to East Coast Christian University or going to any Bible college, your goal is clearly to better yourself. If we're coming to East Coast Christian University, I'm going to bet 9 times out of 10 we're sitting in here because we do have a desire to build the kingdom. And so if that's truly our desire, however that happens, we should have a desire to do that well. And you've heard pastors and speakers and teachers for the word even where you're just like, oh, ow. that kind of hurt. I wish they wouldn't have said it that way. Or just, you can just tell they're a little rough around the edges. No offense, young guys. But sometimes young guys who jump out of they're just take off off the starting block and don't have a lot of mentorship. And I said, don't take offense because you guys have great mentorship. This isn't you. But there are young guys, young girls will take up out of the starting block with so rough around the edges, and when they start their speaking career, it is not fun and it's very painful to watch. But then as they grow and they get older and they start doing it more and more, they get better. And some of them don't, and they don't keep going on. But like that, it is nice to be able to present well so that you're not having people sitting there going, "Oh, what? What is he talking about? What?" So anyway, that's me. I get off the topic, so I'm not the best speaker ever. I like relational interaction more than I do, being a little too All right. So, we probably should take a 5-minute break and we'll start. I'm on slide 10. Yes. Let's take a little short 5-minute break. Use the restroom if you need to, and then we will get started on the next part.
Sorry, Al.